She ordered 2 glasses of champagne. One for her, one for me, but only took one back to the table. Mine never arrived. I watched her from across the room, the flute in her hand catching the ballroom lights like it was in on the joke. She laughed at something the man next to her said, touched his forearm, tilted her head in that slow, deliberate way like she couldn't hear, but she could. Isla never missed a word when it came from someone interesting. She used to laugh like that with me. Used to. I sat alone at a table set for 8, surrounded by empty chairs and folded name cards. My name was spelled wrong, Bennett with 1 T. She told me once she loved that about me, that I was the kind of guy who corrected typos in restaurant menus and wedding invitations. Now I wonder if that was always code for "you're exhausting." Anyway, I stayed seated. I counted how many people she touched while moving through the room. 6. One hand on a shoulder, a pat on someone's back, fingers resting on a lapel for just a moment too long. That's Isla, the perfect hostess, even when it's not her party. The 7th person she touched was him. I didn't know his name yet. Didn't need to. The way she leaned and said everything. And me? I sat there, sipping flat water and feeling like a forgotten coat in a stranger's hallway. She didn't look at me for a full 40 minutes. Not once. Not until the CEO walked in and gave a short, awful speech about teamwork and pushing the envelope. Everyone clapped. I didn't. Isla glanced back then, maybe because she felt it, that subtle absence of my hands. When she saw me watching her, her face froze. Only for a second, but it was there. That tiny flicker of guilt, or annoyance, or both. And then she did something she hadn't done in months. She walked toward me. Her heels clicked like a countdown. She reached out her hand. And I stood up, leaned in close, and whispered. Not after. I didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't throw my drink or make a scene like some tragic husband in a drama. I just left her standing there, hand still outstretched. She stood there for longer than I expected. Maybe she thought I'd turn back around. Maybe she assumed I'd crack, like I always do, smile awkwardly, sit down, offer her the seat beside me like nothing had just happened. But not this time. Not after the way she looked at him when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Not after watching her play the room like I was an accidental +1 to her curated life. I didn't head for the coat check or the exit. I needed space, but not absence. I needed to see what she would do when I wasn't frozen in place, whether the hand that had reached for mine would fall to her side in defeat or drift toward him instead. So I moved away from the tables, slow, deliberate, toward the edge of the room where the lights were dimmer and the music didn't quite reach. From there, I could still see everything. And she did exactly what I feared. She didn't go after me. Instead, she turned and walked in the opposite direction, back toward the man in the navy suit. The one with the confident posture and the kind of jawline that magazine ads are built around. I'd noticed him earlier, but pretended not to. I pretended not to notice a lot of things over the last 6 months. Her mood swings, her late nights at the office, the way she always showered the second she got home, even when she said she was too tired to eat. He stood near the bar, glass in hand, leaning casually against the counter like he owned it. I watched as she approached him, watched her tuck her hair behind her ear the way she does when she wants to look unbothered. She didn't look unbothered. She looked like someone who just got caught in the middle of a performance, and the audience suddenly stood up and walked out. I wondered if she'd tell him what I said. He whispered, "Not after," and just walked away. She'd say with a laugh, maybe. Or a shrug. Maybe it would be part of the story she'd tell later. How her husband couldn't handle the pressure. How he always made things about himself. That's what she used to say, subtly. That I made moments heavy. That I always felt too much. But she hadn't always looked at me like a burden. There was a time when she used to pause in the hallway just to kiss me for no reason. A time when she'd text me stupid memes in the middle of a board meeting because she missed me. I remember those things. I keep them stored like loose receipts in a drawer I'm too afraid to open, but can't bring myself to throw away. And now here we were. A corporate ballroom filled with plastic smiles and clinking glasses, and I was watching my wife try to pretend nothing had fractured. She leaned in to speak to him again. He nodded. She touched his elbow. Just for a second. But enough. Enough for me to finally let go of whatever I was still gripping. Then, almost as if the universe needed to twist the knife, my phone buzzed. A message from Isla. Please don't do this here. No explanation. No apology. Just that. And that's when something inside me shifted. Not broke, not snapped. Just quietly rearranged itself. I looked up, and she was watching me now, eyes wide, full of something that almost looked like regret. But regret too late is just ego in costume. I stared back without flinching. No more wondering. No more, maybe I'm being dramatic. No more apologizing for needing what she stopped giving me. I didn't reply. I simply placed my phone screen up on the nearest table, let her see that I'd read it, and walked toward the far side of the ballroom where the glass walls overlooked the city. I stood there for a long time, watching the lights flicker in windows I'd never live in. I imagined what people behind those windows were doing. Couples eating dinner, laughing, arguing, existing together in whatever their version of normal was. Behind me, the music swelled again. Applause. Someone gave a speech. She didn't come after me. Of course she didn't. I don't know how long I stood by that glass wall. 5 minutes? 20? Long enough for the city lights to feel like they were pulsing with my heartbeat. Long enough to realize no one had come looking for me. Not her. Not anyone. I was just another man in a suit, blurred into the background like the city behind the window, invisible in plain sight. Eventually, I left the ballroom. Not dramatically, not storming out like in some movie. I just slipped out a side door and followed the hallway past the coat check and into a lounge area no one was using. The room was dimly lit, quieter, furnished like a waiting room for people who didn't want to be part of the main event. It felt right. There was a tray of untouched pastries on a side table, next to a silver coffee urn that had long gone cold. I sat on the edge of a velvet couch and pulled out my phone. Not to call anyone, just to scroll. To pretend I wasn't unraveling. But then I saw it. A photo. Not from her. From a colleague. One of those fun group shots people take at events and mass send through work chats. There she was, center of the frame, holding her champagne glass, laughing. He was behind her, not quite touching, but angled in that way people do when they want to be part of someone's space without making it obvious. If you weren't looking for it, you'd miss it. But I was trained to see it now, the closeness, the invitation. The worst part? She looked happy. Not fake happy. Not performative. Genuinely, unmistakably at ease. Like she belonged in that moment, and I never did. I stared at that photo until the screen dimmed. Then I opened our text thread, as if I was going to respond to the last message she'd sent me. Please don't do this here. 7 words, and yet none of them told me what this actually was. Maybe she didn't even know. Maybe I was supposed to define it for her. Be the villain so she could remain innocent. Be the overreacting husband while she stayed the misunderstood partner. But I wasn't going to play that role tonight. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I thought about sending something, anything. Not to accuse her, not even to demand answers, but just to remind her that I was still sitting somewhere inside this building, seeing everything. Instead, I closed the thread. I stood, walked to the hallway mirror just outside the lounge, and looked at myself. Not in the way you do to fix your tie or smooth your hair. I looked like I was trying to see through myself, as if somewhere beneath the surface there was a version of me I used to recognize. The man who made Isla laugh without trying. The man who thought love was something you built, not something you auditioned for. And then I noticed it, on my collar. Lipstick. A faint red smudge, just barely there. And not from her. Isla hadn't kissed me tonight. Not once. It was probably from earlier in the evening when someone hugged me at the welcome table. A senior consultant from accounting, I think. It didn't matter. What mattered was how it made me feel. That tiny mark sparked something dangerous in my brain, something I wasn't prepared for. Because now I had a weapon, something I could use. And I hated myself for thinking it. I wiped it off. Gently, slowly, like erasing a thought before it could become a decision. But the idea stayed. It lingered. Not revenge. Not really. More like an equalizer. Something to tilt the scales, even for just a moment. Because she had him in the background of photos. She had secrets and silent texts and hotel keys that probably weren't just for conferences. And I had what? Silence. A cold coffee urn? A lipstick smudge from a stranger? No, I needed more. So I walked back toward the ballroom. Not to find her, but to find out what I was really willing to do when the part of me that still loved her finally stopped defending her. When I returned to the ballroom, nothing had changed, and that was the worst part. The world hadn't tilted, the lights hadn't dimmed. No one looked up from their drinks or conversations. People laughed. Glasses clinked. A familiar pop song played through polished speakers like nothing was broken. But I had changed. That mattered. I was no longer wondering if something was wrong. I was no longer offering her the benefit of the doubt like a dog waiting by a door that would never open. I stood just inside the entrance, half-shadowed behind a potted plant like I was observing a crime scene. Not dramatic, just quiet. Watching. She was at the far end of the room, standing too close to him again. Camden. I'd finally learned his name. Someone had called out to him earlier during a toast. Camden, grab another bottle. Like he was part of the furniture. Familiar. Liked. Safe. I wondered how long he'd been circling her orbit. Was this his first event? His third? Or had he been at all of them, just waiting for the exact moment I'd decide to blink? I watched her laugh again. That same head tilt. I wondered how many times I had mistaken that move as affection when it was just one of her professional tricks. A tool in her corporate charm kit. She placed her hand on Camden's shoulder and whispered something close to his ear. His eyes narrowed like whatever she said was meant only for him. He smiled. She smiled back. And then, as if sensing me, she turned her head and saw me standing there. For the first time all night, she didn't flinch. She didn't smile either. She just stared. Like I was the surprise guest she hoped wouldn't show. And that's when I made the smallest move that would change everything. I raised my hand. Not to wave, not to beckon, just lifted it slowly, deliberately. A single motion that said, yes, I see you. I've seen everything. And then I turned away. Not toward the bar. Not toward the door. But toward the stage. It was empty now, cleared after the last round of speeches. A half glass of wine sat on the corner of the podium, probably forgotten by someone too busy congratulating themselves. I walked straight up the steps, no hesitation, like I belonged there. Like I had something important to say. But I didn't take the mic. I just stood there. For a moment. Looking out at the crowd, who were mostly too drunk or distracted to notice me. But a few did. A few heads turned. A few whispers began to form. And then Isla noticed, her expression shifting for the first time into something between alarm and disbelief. She took a single step forward. Camden placed his hand gently on her arm, trying to stop her. And I just stood there, surveying this room of polished betrayal and plastic loyalty. My heart wasn't racing. That surprised me. I expected panic. Shame. But all I felt was clarity. I wasn't going to expose her. I wasn't going to yell or point or drag her into the spotlight like some vengeful ghost of a failed marriage. Instead, I walked back down the steps and made sure she was watching when I did the one thing I knew would ruin her story. I walked to her boss, a woman named Kendra, smart, severe, the type who notices everything but says little. Isla had always said Kendra respected me, called me measured. I approached her table, leaned in, and said calmly, "Thank you for the invitation tonight. I just wanted to say how grateful I am to finally see the company's culture up close." Kendra tilted her head. "Everything all right, Bennett?" I nodded slowly. I think tonight answered a lot of questions. And then, without waiting for a response, I stepped back, turned, and made for the exit. No coat, no phone, just me and the certainty that the version of our marriage she'd been selling to everyone else was about to stop being so easy to explain. Behind me, I could feel her watching. Not chasing, just watching. And I wanted her to feel that silence more than anything I could have said aloud. I didn't go home. That would have been too easy for her. I knew if I walked through that door, she'd act like nothing happened, set her purse down, take off her earrings, maybe ask if I'd eaten. That's the kind of woman Isla is. She's not a liar. She's a story shifter. She rewrites meaning, edits timelines. She doesn't deny things, she reframes them. And I wasn't ready to be rewritten tonight. So I didn't go home. I went to a diner. One of those 24-hour places with peeling menus and booths that have absorbed decades of secrets. I sat in the back, ordered coffee I didn't want, and stared out the window as a couple argued in the parking lot. Their fight looked raw and unscripted. I envied them for that, for not pretending. I waited for the first message. It didn't take long. "Where are you?" I didn't reply. A few minutes later. "Can we please talk?" Still nothing. Then, "I'm worried. Just tell me you're safe." That one almost got me. Not because I believed her, but because some old muscle memory still wanted to protect her from discomfort. I stared at the message until the phone's screen dimmed again. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened her contact, hit edit, and changed her name from Isla Ring to just Isla. It was stupid, petty, but I did it anyway. Around 1:30 a.m., I finally paid and left the diner. I walked 2 blocks to my brother's place, buzzed the intercom, and when he answered half asleep, I just said, "Can I crash?" He didn't ask questions. Just let me in, handed me a blanket, and went back to bed. We're not close. Haven't been since college. But tonight, he didn't need to be a brother, just a door that wasn't locked. I lay on his couch staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail of the night. Every glance, every silence, every time I told myself maybe it's not what it looks like. But of course it was. Maybe not in the literal sense. Maybe they hadn't kissed or touched or disappeared into a hotel suite. But betrayal doesn't need a receipt. It's felt. It's lived. It builds slowly in the spaces where attention disappears. At 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This one was different. Whatever you think you saw, it's not like that. There it was. The first crack. Not, nothing happened. Not, you misunderstood. But whatever you think you saw. That sentence alone confessed more than any admission. I put the phone face down. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I returned to our apartment just after sunrise. I wasn't going back for her. I went back for answers. She was already awake, sitting on the couch in the same dress from the night before, legs tucked under her, staring at the floor like she was waiting for a verdict. She didn't look like herself. Or maybe she looked exactly like herself, and I was only now seeing it. I walked in, set my keys on the counter, and said nothing. She didn't get up, just whispered, "You embarrassed me." That sentence hit harder than I expected. Not "you hurt me." Not "I'm sorry." Just "you embarrassed me." As if my silence, my walk across that stage, my refusal to play along had somehow betrayed her. I let the quiet stretch. Then I said it. "How long?" She didn't flinch, just clenched her jaw and looked away. That told me everything I needed. But she still answered. "I don't know." "It's not." She stopped. "We didn't sleep together." I nodded slowly. "So it's only the emotional part then?" She looked at me like that word offended her. "You don't understand. It's complicated." Of course it was. That's how it always starts. Complicated. Messy. Not what it looks like. Followed by a slow erosion of truth until no one knows what side they're standing on. I sat across from her and asked the one question I never thought I'd say out loud. "Do you love him?" Her eyes filled with water, but she didn't cry. She just whispered, "I don't know." And that was somehow worse than a yes. After she said, "I don't know," the silence between us didn't break. It settled. Heavy. Dense. Like fog that didn't want to lift. I stared at her for a long time, trying to memorize that exact version of her. The one who wasn't deflecting or charming or defending. Just sitting there. Caught. It's strange, the things you remember in moments like that. I didn't think about Camden. I didn't think about the gala. I thought about a Tuesday afternoon 3 years ago when she'd fallen asleep on the couch after dental surgery. Cheeks swollen, hair a mess, drooling onto a pillow. I remembered how she reached for my hand, even in sleep. How she gripped it like I was the only thing tethering her to comfort. Where had that version of her gone? Or maybe the better question was, where had that version of us gone? "I need to pack a few things," I said, standing slowly. She looked up. "What? Where are you going?" "Somewhere that isn't here," I replied, already moving toward the bedroom. "Just for a while." Her voice cracked. "You're leaving?" I stopped in the hallway. "I left last night. You just didn't notice until the room got quiet." She didn't follow me. I packed lightly, just enough for a few days. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of thinking this was dramatic. I wasn't making a statement. I was preserving what was left of my own mind. A change of clothes. A charger. My toothbrush. My journal, tucked between 2 shirts. It wasn't much, but it felt like escape. When I came back into the living room, she was still on the couch, exactly as I'd left her. Except now her hands were shaking. She asked, "Are you going to tell anyone?" The question felt like an echo in a canyon. It bounced around the walls of my skull, uninvited. I looked at her, not with anger, not even with sadness, but with something colder. "I don't need to," I said. "You already did." "What does that mean?" she asked, voice brittle. "Camden," I replied. "You didn't exactly hide it. Do you really think people didn't notice? You two were practically orbiting each other all night." "That's not fair." I shrugged. Neither was being left alone at a table for 40 minutes while my wife made sure everyone in the company knew who she really wanted to be seen with. She looked away. That was the first time she didn't try to argue. The first time she realized maybe she'd already lost the story. "You're not the villain," I added. "But you stopped being the hero a long time ago." I left then, quietly. No slamming doors. No ultimatums. Just the click of the lock behind me and the sound of my own footsteps in the hallway. It was strange how calm I felt, like I had finally exhaled after months of holding my breath. I didn't go to my brother's this time. I got a room at a hotel near the office. One of those bland business chain ones where the walls are beige and the lobby smells like lemon-scented air conditioning. I sat on the bed, fully dressed, for almost an hour before I took out my journal. Not to write anything poetic, just a list. A list of everything I gave up for her. It started simple. My weekends. My writing. My guitar. Sunday pancakes. Silence. Myself. I stared at that last one for a long time. Because that was the truth, wasn't it? It wasn't just that she found someone else interesting. It was that she had slowly pulled me out of myself, strand by strand, and called it compromise. And I let her. I let her because I thought that's what love was. Not a partnership, but a sacrifice. And now that I had nothing left to give, she started looking elsewhere. The worst part? I didn't even hate her for it. I hated myself for making it so easy. 2 days passed before she showed up. I'd left no note, no forwarding address, just absence. The kind that weighs heavier than anger. Silence, when it's sharpened the right way, can cut deeper than screaming ever will. And I knew Isla. She could tolerate distance, but not invisibility. She was the kind of person who needed to be seen, even if it was through disappointment. And when that vanished too, she unraveled. She texted me once more the morning after I left. I think we need to talk. Please. I ignored it. I spent most of that day wandering the city like a ghost in business attire, walking without direction, thinking without thinking. Every park bench and crowded cafe felt like a temporary refuge from a life I'd overinvested in. At one point I sat in a bookstore for nearly an hour pretending to read, just so I wouldn't have to return to the dull hum of my hotel room. But eventually I did. And that's when I found her. Isla, sitting cross-legged on the hallway floor outside my room, back against the wall, hair pulled into a half-hearted bun, makeup smudged from exhaustion or crying or both. For a moment I didn't move. I just watched her. She didn't notice me right away. When she did, she stood too quickly and tried to smile. It broke halfway up her face. "Hey," she said, voice dry. I didn't know where else to go. I slipped the keycard into the lock. "So you came here? I needed to see you." "You saw enough of me at the gala," I replied. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. She followed without asking, like she had every right. She looked around the room, sterile, uninspired, emotionally vacant, and I think it startled her to see me in a space so neutral. Like she expected to find my sadness framed on the walls or folded in the sheets. But there was nothing, just quiet and detachment. She sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't. I stayed standing. "I'm not sleeping with him," she said. I let the silence answer. She tried again. "I never planned anything. It wasn't like that." Still, I said nothing. "Can you please say something?" she asked. So I did. I walked over to the desk, opened my journal, and tore out a single page. The one with the list. I handed it to her. Watched her eyes move down the page, expression shifting with each line like she was flipping through an old photo album of things she forgot she'd destroyed. "You kept a list?" "No," I said. "I wrote it 2 nights ago. That's not keeping. That's realizing." She folded the paper, slowly, with too much care. "I never asked you to give those things up." "I know. But you did." "I know that too." For the first time, she looked like she didn't know what to say. Her face went blank, not in a calculating way, but in a way that suggested, finally, the weight had landed. The cost of everything that had gone unsaid, unchecked, and unchallenged for too long. "I still love you," she whispered. It didn't sting. It didn't heal. It just hung there, like smoke from a match that never lit. I nodded slowly, then said, "But you don't respect me, and love without respect is just decoration." She flinched, just slightly. Enough. And then came the line I didn't plan, but that had been living in me for months without a name. "You don't want a husband. You want an audience." The silence that followed was so absolute, it felt physical. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just told the truth and let it sit in the middle of that sterile room like a monument to everything we'd both ignored. She stood, clutched the paper in her hand like it might anchor her. She opened her mouth once, closed it, then turned and walked to the door. No hug, no begging, no promises, just one final glance over her shoulder, and then she left. And for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't follow. She didn't come back the next day. or the one after. There was no dramatic confrontation. No late-night knock at the door. No, I made a mistake voicemail. Just quiet. Which, for a while, felt unnatural. After years of walking on eggshells, silence doesn't feel like peace. It feels like waiting for the next crack. But nothing cracked. It just stayed still. And then, eventually, it softened. I didn't text her. I didn't block her either. I didn't need to punish her, or erase her, or even forgive her. I just needed distance. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. To hear my own voice again, without hers layered over every decision I made. 3 weeks passed. Then one morning, I sat at a small cafe near my temporary place, sipping coffee, watching the rain against the window, and I caught myself smiling. Not because anything amazing had happened, but because nothing was wrong. There was no weight pressing on my chest, no tension in my shoulders, no second-guessing every breath. It was like learning how to stand still again, and realizing the ground wasn't shaking anymore. I started doing small things for myself. I picked up my guitar again. It felt awkward at first. My fingers fumbled, but it was mine. The sound, the space, the moment. I went back to the community writing group I'd stopped attending 2 years ago. They welcomed me like I'd never left. I got an apartment across town. Not big, not sleek, but sunlight poured in every morning and the walls were mine. I chose every object inside. No compromises. No decorations that were neutral enough for both of us. Just me. I didn't tell anyone at work what had happened. I didn't need to. People sensed it, probably. The shift. The quiet confidence that replaces chronic people-pleasing once you stop begging to be chosen. And Isla? She didn't chase me. But 6 weeks after the gala, she sent one final message. I hope you're doing okay. I've started therapy. I'm sorry for everything. That was all. No questions. No justifications. Just a period at the end of a sentence that had gone on too long. I didn't respond. Not because I hated her. Because I didn't owe her a continuation. Some stories deserve a clean ending. And I had finally given myself permission to write one. It's strange, when people talk about heartbreak, they always focus on the leaving. The betrayal. The pain. But they never talk about the after. The quiet joy of rediscovering who you are when no one's shaping you. The relief of eating alone and not calling it loneliness. The power in choosing your own silence instead of suffering someone else's noise. At the corporate event, she reached for me, and I whispered, not after. Not after what I gave. Not after what she took. Not after what I reclaimed. And now? Now I'm finally reaching for myself. And this time, I'm not letting go.